Professional development. So for my ideal class, I'm going to be teaching in a middle school in an inclusion classroom. Some of the expectations that I'll have is like same expectations every day. So when they come, students come in from the bus, or when they come in from their parents dropping them off, them knowing where to hang their backpacks up. They can do it independently. They don't have to depend on an adult to do it. For breakfast at my school, you need a ID card. So if it's hanging up where your backpack is hanging up, you need to grab that, and then you can go to breakfast and get your breakfast. AB is usually the first hour in my school, so knowing what items to grab and walk into class, knowing where your class is. Some of the rules in the general ed classroom is to walk into the classroom quietly. I know some students have a hard time with that. Sit down in an assigned seat and stay seated until told otherwise. If you need help, raise your hand. 5, complete the assignment. And the 6th step is to wait for teacher or bell to dismiss you from the class, or student from the class. The expectations in the classroom. It's a little bit different from the general ed classroom. So still want to make sure there's some expectations there. Stay in the seat. Staying with rotation, so making sure you're staying with the same students that you're assigned to. Using words to ask for help instead of maybe kicking or hitting a student. Having nice hands and using kind words. Respect peers and teachers' space, so make sure that we're not getting too close to anybody. Working with group. Raising your hand before answering, so not just blurting out the answer. Unless told otherwise from teacher, just go ahead and say it. Some of the lunch rules is staying in seat, making sure that you're students only eating from their own tray and not someone else's tray, and cleaning up after themselves. Going home expectation is to clean up the area they're working in, put belongings in the backpack that need to be put away, or some worksheets they were working on. Depending on the weather, if they need a coat or a jacket, making sure to put that on before they go. And then right now especially is washing hands and waiting their turn before. Can't just shove yourself in, gotta wait until someone's done. And then saying goodbye to peers and teacher. So as a class, we can decide on some rules that we want as well. We can write some down and we can put it above the whiteboard where all the other rules will be listed. Positive behavior support. I will encourage the students, on the activity they're working on and telling them how well they're doing or how proud of them I am. I will be specific with my vocals, so my voice, and I will be sure to tell them what I'm rewarding them on and why I'm so happy with them. I can also use a token system, so if we're going into general ed class, and I know some of the students who struggle with that, making a visual, and so it can have the activities or the number of steps that they have to do for that class, and so they know what to expect, when to expect, and when it's over. Consequences, changing inappropriate behavior, so giving a warning is the first step. And then once the student does it again, then making sure that there's a consequence. And the consequences that I have is a timeout, which is our school rule where we do that for the entire school. And then for work completion. So the student can't move to the next activity or next class until the completed work is done. For the timeout, I'll set a timer for 3 minutes. And if they don't stay in the seat where I'm asking them to sit, then the timer will pause, and once they sit back down, the timer will resume. And I will explain to each student after they're in timeout or after they're done with their work of why I kept them later or why I put them in timeout. And as they're going to timeout, staff members need to know that, or even when they're not completing the work, they can engage in other conversations, because I know students will like to sidetrack and have other conversations. So classroom tweaks, some of the behaviors. So after school started, some of the other things that I can look for once we get to know our students a little bit more is target behavior. So what is causing the meltdown? We can take some data. One of them is event sampling. So the number of times behavior occurs, duration, the length of the behavior. The interval sampling is whether a behavior occurs during a specific interval of time. And we want to keep data on the goals to make sure are they being successful, are they succeeding towards their goals. Having meetings with teachers and paras who work with students and asking them if they need additional work or if they need additional timers or visuals, anything like that. And as for the FBA, define the target behavior, collecting data and monitor behavior, record behaviors that precede and follow target behavior, develop hypotheses of conditions under which target behavior occurs, and develop intervention plan. So I want to make sure that staff understands a multi-tier system as well. So tier 1 is a whole group, so that applies to all of the students. That's 30 minutes, so is the student retained the instruction as the rest of classes. Tier 2 is intervention, so smaller group, is the student being more successful with the less kids? And if not, then we go to tier 3, and that's the smallest group. It's usually a resource class, usually less than 6 students, and then reassess how they're doing with the smaller group. Social difficulties. So for interaction, the student is engaging with his or her peers, knowing like if they're involving themselves with other people. Aggression, so when they're getting mad, are they just fighting, bullying others, or assaulting others, or they have it under control? Attention problems and hyperactivity, so like ADD and ADHD. So making sure the students are staying on track, checking on them regularly, helping them get organized. Self-concept, make sure we're carrying out what parents want for their child. So we ask what their goal is for their student, or for our student, their child, and making sure that we're helping out with that. Social alienation is do the students feel involved with their school, the staff, their teachers, their peers? And then students' health, we want to make sure that if any students are feeling suicidal, or the ones that are healthy, making sure they stay healthy, and if the ones that are suicidal, making sure we meet with the counselor and making sure that we follow up with all the steps that need to be taken for that. Circle of friends, I think that's a great idea. That involves peers in the classroom, general ed students in the classroom, or any activity you choose to do it. You can do it in the gym, you can do it in the commons, you can do it outside. So how I envision Circle of Friends in my class is having students come in daily. It could be like 2 to 3 students, and work with my students as they go through their rotations, and they can just help them. They can model what is expected, and they can do the same thing as the student is doing. And for another part of that, I want each of my students to have a friend. So once a week, I want some of the peers to come into class, and if I have 12 students, I want all 12 students to have a friend. And they could be working on Osmo, which is like a iPad, and you do activities with you can do like math, the shapes, you can spell words. They can play a board game, learning to take turns. We can work on a specific social skill. We could do an art project, or we can even bake. I want the students coming in to not feel pressure, but I do want them to feel welcome. I want them to be a model and show what is expected. And my students can benefit from friends coming in and learning from their peers. And it's different from me as a staff member or another staff member telling them what to do or trying to practice modeling, if they see their peers doing it, they're more likely wanting to do that. One of my concerns is if the peers come in and my student refuses to work with them or is having a meltdown, to make sure that I communicate on both sides. So for the friends coming in, making sure like if this happens, this is what you do. You can get an adult, and there's no hard feelings. It's just change, and some students don't like change. And as for that part on my end, I want to make sure that my students are prepared for that day, knowing that it's gonna be reminded throughout the day that Circle of Friends is happening. Have a social story, so they know what to expect and who they're working with, so the changes and the transition is a little bit easier. Procedures in my classroom structure, I'll have visual timers so that students can see them. I'll meet with my staff, making sure that we're communicating on both ends, knowing what we both need. And I will be working with small group for my class. So I will make sure that they will be successful there and into the classroom. Thank you.